You ever look at a map of Europe and wonder, how did it get to be this way? A collection of distinct countries? Well, we're going to dive into how one single, really powerful idea, the idea of the nation, completely reshaped a continent, redrawing the map and changing how millions of people saw themselves. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with where this whole idea even came from. Then we'll see how it went head-to-head with the old empires. After that, what happened when talking wasn't enough? We'll explore how artists made an abstract idea like a nation feel real. And finally, how this powerful sense of pride took a really dark turn. All right, let's set the scene. Before the 1800s, if you lived in Europe, you weren't really Italian or German. You were a subject of some king or emperor. Your loyalty was to a person, a dynasty, not an idea. So what on earth changed? What even is a nation? And how did this new concept get so powerful that it just shattered the old world order? This really gets to the heart of it. On the one hand, you had the old way. You were a subject. Your identity, your loyalty, it was all tied to one person, a king. But then came this new idea. You're a citizen. You're part of a collective, a community with a shared culture, a shared history, and shared rights. I mean, that is a huge shift in thinking, absolutely revolutionary. So where did this all kick off? Well, ground zero, the spark that lit the whole fire, was the French Revolution in 1789. And you have to get this. It wasn't just about overthrowing a king. No, it was way bigger. It was about inventing a totally new way for people to see themselves. The French revolutionaries were like master marketers, seriously. They cooked up these powerful new ideas like the fatherland and the citizen. Then they built a brand around them. They created symbols people could rally behind. A new flag for everybody, not just the king. A national assembly that actually represented the people. The same laws for everyone. And promoting one single language to tie it all together. They were literally building a nation from the scratch. And then Napoleon shows up, and he is such a complicated figure in the story. On one hand, his armies marched across Europe spreading these revolutionary ideas like equality for all. But on the other hand, his rule meant crushing taxes, censorship, and being forced into his armies. People started thinking, hey, wait a minute, this liberation feels an awful lot like being conquered. And ironically, the very act of resisting Napoleon is what helped other places forge their own national identities. So this sets the stage for the big showdown of the early 19th century. Napoleon's defeated, but you can't put the genie back in the bottle. His ideas are out there, and Europe is now basically split right down the middle, between people who want to build new nations and the old guard who want to put the kings and empires back together. And these were two totally different visions for the future. In one corner, you've got the rising middle class who are all about liberal nationalism. They want individual freedoms, a say in their government, and unified nations. And in the other corner, you have the conservatives. They're trying to hold on to the old world of monarchies, tradition, and the power of the church. This quote from Austria's top diplomat, Metternich, just nails the conservative fear. He was basically saying France was contagious, a virus of revolution. And guess what? He was right. Another revolution erupts in France in 1830, and boom, just like he predicted, the cold spreads. Belgium revolts and becomes an independent country. This idea was spreading like wildfire. But this wasn't all just politics and protests. Nationalism was also a movement of the heart, a cultural wave called Romanticism. Thinkers started arguing that the true soul of a nation wasn't in its palaces. It was in its common people, das Volk, as they said in German. So you had artists and poets collecting old folk songs, celebrating a shared past, and using culture to weave together the fabric of a nation. After a huge wave of liberal revolutions in 1848, mostly fizzled out, nationalism took a much harder, more ruthless turn. The age of romantic speeches was over. The age of military force was about to begin. In the German lands, the liberals tried to do it the peaceful way. They held a parliament, they wrote a constitution, they even offered the crown of a united Germany to the King of Prussia, and he turned them down flat. With that one no, the door to a democratic Germany slammed shut, and the job of unification fell to the conservatives. And the man for that job was Otto von Bismarck. He had zero time for debates and voting. His philosophy was simple, it was brutal, and it became famous: blood and iron. He flat out said that the big issues of the day wouldn't be decided by speeches, but by war. And he meant it. Over just 7 years, Bismarck's Prussia fought 3 brilliantly calculated wars, first against Denmark, then Austria, and finally, the big one, against France. Each victory pulled more German states into Prussia's orbit, until finally, in 1871, the German Empire was proclaimed. A similar story was unfolding down in Italy, just with a different cast. It was a perfect team-up. You had the brains, the cunning diplomat Count Cavour, making deals from the top, and you had the heart, the fiery revolutionary Giuseppe Garibaldi and his volunteer army, the Red Shirts, fighting from the bottom up. Together, they stitched a united Italy out of a patchwork of separate kingdoms. Okay, so you've got these new countries on the map, but how do you make people feel like they belong to them? How do you make an abstract idea like the nation feel personal? Well, that's where art comes in. Artists did something genius. They gave the nation a human face. In France, she was Marianne. Not a real person, but a powerful symbol of liberty and the Republic. And they put her image on everything. Statues, coins, stamps. Suddenly the nation was a face you saw every single day. Germany did the same thing. Their national symbol was Germania. And let me tell you, every single detail in her image was packed with meaning, telling the story of this new German nation. Let's break it down. Her crown isn't made of gold, it's made of oak leaves. In German culture, that's a huge symbol of heroism and strength. And look at her feet. You can see broken chains. The message there is crystal clear. The German people are now free. And this is probably the most interesting part. She's holding a sword, but there's an olive branch wrapped around it. This was a statement: we are ready to fight to defend ourselves, but we would prefer peace. It perfectly captured the dual nature of the new empire. But as the 19th century drew to a close, nationalism started to change. This is where the story takes a dark turn. The idea that began as a force for liberation started to curdle into something aggressive, intolerant, and dangerous. The new game in town was imperialism. National pride was no longer just about loving your own people, it became a reason to go out and dominate others. It kicked off a frantic race for colonies around the world, and aggressive nationalism was the fuel for the fire. And the most dangerous flashpoint in all of this was the Balkans. The old Ottoman Empire was crumbling, leaving a massive power vacuum. A whole bunch of new nations popped up, all fired up with their own nationalism, and they were all rivals. To make matters worse, the big European powers were constantly meddling, using these smaller countries as pawns in their own great game. The entire region was known as the powder keg of Europe. And in 1914, that powder keg finally exploded, plunging the entire world into the First World War. This whole journey, from a revolutionary ideal of brotherhood to a catastrophic global war, leaves us with a pretty heavy question, one that's still so relevant today. Where exactly is the line between pride in who you are and aggression towards those who are not?